You know, isn't it great that we don't have to travel this journey alone? I'm a grateful believer in Jesus Christ, celebrating recovery over drugs and alcohol, lust, pornography, and controlling behaviors. My name's Mark.
Hi, Mark.
I am so privileged to share my story with my CR family right here. It's funny, I was telling a story earlier that I asked my son, I said, Micah, I gave my testimony here at the Kalamazoo CR, haven't I? He says, no, you haven't.
I heard it.
Because I had to give it at Paw. It's like it was going to be an easy thing. I'll just pull out my testimony, print it off, and I'll be ready to go. No testimony. I haven't written it yet. And so I spent days going over my life in writing that testimony and showing how God has been present in my life through the years of good and bad. And so that's what I'm excited to share with you today. Let me start with a word of prayer. Lord, I offer up my life and story to you. Please use it to bring hope and encouragement to my brothers and sisters as they live their lives one day at a time on their recovery journey. Amen. Amen. I'd like to start out with Principle 8. Yield myself to God to be used to bring the good news to others, both by my example and my words. Sharing my testimony is an important step of faith. And it's one way that all of us can bring good news to other people. So I encourage you, spend some time thinking about what God's doing in your life now. And begin thinking about your own testimony, your own journey, and how God's been a part of that. I was raised along with my older brother by two loving parents. Dad worked at the local cement plant for 38 years and provided well for us all. He was a loving dad who enjoyed spending time with us, supporting us, nurturing us, and teaching us with his life. Mom stayed home caring for us, transporting us to events, disciplining us, and encouraging us to do our best. We went to church together until we reached high school. Dad and Mom allowed us to decide for ourselves whether we wanted to continue or not. Even though I had trusted Jesus as my Lord and Savior at the age of 8 and was baptized afterwards, I decided to stop going to church. That was 9th grade. So in the late 60s and early 70s, our neighborhood was a melting pot of families and kids. This was a time when the Beatles and other bands were transforming music. The Vietnam War era arrived, and the hippies, while they preferred peace and free love over war, and drugs were becoming more and more prevalent. These cultural changes were affecting our society, our perception of sex, drugs, and so many different worldviews. It was also affecting my neighborhood. Since I had an older brother, Dave, almost 3 years older, I tended to stick around with him and his friends as long as they'd allow me to. Often we would be playing baseball down the street or basketball in our driveway. When hanging out with the older kids, there was always the risk of being introduced to things that I knew that my parents would not approve of. I remember a number of these activities that were the beginning of some of my impulsive behaviors, my impulsive tendencies. I remember having a fort behind our garage. And I normally hung out there with my own friends, just doing stupid stuff that boys do. But this one time I was in there, and a number of older friends, boys and girls, got together for a game of strip poker. And I was allowed to observe. Well, this was my first exposure to any kind of female nudity or anatomy. Another time is when I was at a cousin's house. This stuff can just pop up in a moment. I remember my older cousin bringing out some magazines that had nude women in them. I didn't hesitate to have another look. I didn't even know what pornography was, but now I was initiated into the dark world of pornography and the unhealthy desires and obsession that it began to instill in me. As an 8th grader, similar kinds of activities involving older friends introduced me to beer and later pot. Deep down, I knew looking at pornography and spending time drinking beer and smoking pot weren't the right choices. I knew God would not be pleased. My parents modeled a life that was not based on these unwise choices. They modeled love for us and others and would not hesitate to punish me when I denied doing the very things. Because lying started becoming natural when I became more involved in these impulsive behaviors. Then high school came. I spent a lot of time pursuing sports in high school. I played both basketball and baseball in high school. I was a decent student in high school. Mom made sure of that. She was both encouraging and strict about my academics. She pushed and stayed on top of my progress. She didn't graduate from high school, so she pushed her children to excel. My impulsive behavior followed me. Drinking, smoking pot, and lusting were commonplace with my circle of friends, especially on weekends. With a wider group of friends, the party experiences grew darker. Hard alcohol, X-rated videos were introduced by others at the party gatherings. Although I partied on weekends, I was still motivated to do well in school. I didn't have many issues with my parents. I loved and respected them. However, when I did have issues, it usually involved lies about where I was and what I was doing. My mother knew me well. She knew that I had been drinking or smoking pot. When she would call me out, I normally denied it, and then the arguments began. Denial and lies become the normal life in an addict. I have always enjoyed friendship with girls. I have tremendous respect for them and treated them with kindness. I considered myself shy, kind, and good-natured. I credit my parents with my early upbringing and in the church for that. But I was horrified by the prospect of asking a girl out for a date. I never quite figured out why. Perhaps I had a self-esteem issue and a definite fear of rejection. One thing I did know is that my growing addiction to pornography affected my motives behind many of my relationships. I still respected the girls and treated them with kindness, but my thought life turned lustful. I enjoyed their company and engaged in conversation, but always had sexual encounters in the back of my mind. These were mostly fantasies because these fantasies rarely came true in high school. Probably because I was shy and feared rejection. After high school, I began community college. I became a decent student, but my impulsive behaviors began to affect my study habits. I would often meet up with friends at lunch or during an extended break and drink or smoke pot to catch a quick buzz. Then we'd go back to class. I deceived myself to think that I could continue to do well academically and get buzzed at the same time. I began to have a less caring attitude about my studies because it started to interfere with my partying. It took me 3 years to get my 2-year degree. At community college, my perspective about women hadn't changed. I still respected and was kind and really enjoyed their company. I did notice that more women in college enjoyed partying as much as I did, and would often party on dates. Because of my drinking and drug use, my shyness and inhibitions were often replaced with more boldness and confidence toward initiating consensual sexual encounters. One encounter had a devastating ending. With one woman, we were caught by her mother, who had returned home early from a Bible study. I was devastated for how I had caused such strife between a mother and her daughter. I never saw them again. Substance abuse and lustful behaviors are a dangerous combination and often led to poor decisions and consequences. I transferred to Ferris State College to seek a 4-year degree. After 3 years at Ferris, I completed my dual degree in computers and business. My time at Ferris was pretty similar to my community college experience, at least the first year. School, intramural sports, study, and some drinking during the weekends, especially during the weekends. Binge, substance abuse, and lust on most weekends. I was out of God's will since the day I decided to walk away from God in 9th grade. But that was about to change. During my second year at Ferris, I met Kimberly. She was hot. I can say that because she's She lived near me, so I got to know her a little better. Also, my roommate had a class with her, so she knew him too. The story goes that she had a crush on him, but had to settle for me. Kimberly was different than other women that I had been with. There seemed to be an innocence or purity about her that I desired. This was not a lustful thing that I was feeling. I was falling for the person who she was inside. I believe God used her to give me a wake-up call, that He is still waiting for me to come back. You know, God is a pursuer. And like a prodigal, He nudged and waited for me. He does that for you too. I remember one day when I was leaving play practice at community college. I was in one of those dramas. And I was coming out at late practice, late rehearsal. And I was walking out to the parking lot, and there was just this person standing at the end of the walkway. And it's like, it's kind of weird, but as I walked by them, they said, "Hey, can I pray for you?" And there's like nobody around. Yet at that moment I said, yes. And you know, I don't remember what they prayed for me, but I can tell you I've never forgotten that. Because that was God reaching out to me, saying at that moment, I'm still waiting for you. And so He will do that and continue to do that for you. He's waiting by the fence for you to come home. Ooh, where was I? Okay. So, Kimberly and I began to have spiritual conversations. And I once again consider God for my own life. Our relationship grew, but my vices were still near. I may have cut back a little bit, but substance abuse and lust still had control in my life. Another devastating day occurred in my life when Kimberly walked in on me and another woman the morning after a night I had been out partying. That was the day I almost lost Kimberly. Shortly after that, Kimberly shared with me that she might want to give her old boyfriend another try. I was crushed, and I realized that I truly loved her that day. We were able to get through that dark time in our relationship. I eventually graduated in 1981 from Ferris and moved to Kalamazoo for a job at the Upjohn Company. Anybody remember that company? They've changed over the years. Kimberly completed her last year of college and moved to Kalamazoo in 1982. We grew in our relationship and married in 1984. Do the math.
40 years.
40 years. That's the same year we began attending the Kalamazoo Free Methodist Church, where we are today. So we've been here for 40 years. After 13 years of wandering away from the Lord, I renewed my relationship and began putting my trust in Him. We wanted to start our house, our home, according to Joshua 24:15b. For as me and my household, we will serve the Lord. For the next 36 years, I had faithfully served the Lord along with Kimberly at this church. As I grew in wisdom and knowledge of the Lord, I began to serve in many teaching and leadership roles. We raised our kids in the way of the Lord and tried to model a life devoted to Christ. I learned to love unconditionally as Christ did. That was a difficult thing for me because my normal mode of love was conditional. In the worst case, with my own kids, if I couldn't control what they did, then I'd withdraw my love. This controlling behavior was pride, a pride issue, and the enemy of the heart. God showed me that His way was better. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind, and with all your strength. The second is this: love your neighbor as yourself. There is no commandment greater than these. Mark 12:30 and 31. So what about my vices? Substance abuse, lust, pornography. I can say that the Lord has given me many periods of sobriety in all these vices over the years, but not complete victory. Some of my triggers over the years have included business trips, hunting trips, and golfing weekends. I had a partying bond with my brother, and we would often binge party with him when golfing or hunting. Since a business trip was on the company's dollar, I would find myself enjoying happy hour more than I should. Isolation and loneliness were triggers for the temptation to fall back to pornography. This could happen when I was away from Kimberly for several days at a time. When these vices were triggered, I rarely spoke to anyone about them and kept them hidden. I essentially was denying that it was even a problem since it happened so infrequently. In 2017, a major health issue appeared in my life. I was diagnosed with a rare liver disease called primary sclerosing cholangitis, PSC for short. There was no cure for this, and I would eventually require a liver transplant. There were many unpleasant side effects, but mostly lots of itching, jaundiced skin, and exhaustion. God gave me peace, and I surrendered my condition over to Him. One good thing with this condition, I could no longer drink alcohol or consume any non-prescribed drugs whether legal or not. I can say today that I've been completely alcohol and drug-free since that diagnosis. Woohoo! suppose staying alive is a good motivation. I hope you come to that place. My condition worsened over the years, and I was placed on the liver transplant list in November of 21. Micah, my son, graciously volunteered to be a live donor since he was a good match for me. This meant that they would open him up, take half his liver, and place it in me. The liver halves then would regenerate themselves to full size. The date was set for May 25th, 2022. But several days before the transplant, they did one more test on Micah. After the test, they were sorry to inform me that Micah's liver had an extra artery, and it would be too risky. I was placed back on the transplant list with no idea how long I'd have to wait. By the grace of God, I had a successful liver transplant on May 24th, 2022. Not only was that a day before I was scheduled with Micah, but Micah didn't even have to go through the surgery. So I was so thankful that God did a miraculous thing for me. Okay. So I'm one of those guys. You know, one of those guys who started going to CR to help support someone else. You know that kind of person? That was me. It was, in my case, it was my son Micah. You might know him. He was one of the founders of this CR right here in Kalamazoo. He was the ministry leader for the first year and a half. He invited me to go to CR, the CR that used to be held at the River Church. Anybody go to that one? Yeah, a good number of you. That's right. I really didn't know much about CR at the time, other than it had a tremendous impact on Micah's faith walk with Jesus, and it helped move him forward in his recovery journey. So I decided to go with him to help support him and see what this was all about. I followed Micah at the meetings, which typically started with the large group, like we're doing here, and then broke into the smaller open share groups. Since Micah went to the sexual integrity small group for men, I went as well. I met some great people there and felt welcomed and safe. The open share meeting was very meaningful to me. I had been to many kinds of men's groups before. Since I've been going to church for 40 years, right? So there were lots of men's groups that I've been exposed to. Bible studies, accountability groups. And this one was different. Men were openly sharing about their hurts, habits, and hang-ups. In particular, they were talking about their struggles and victories over issues of sexual integrity. After a number of weeks, I began also to talk about my own sexual integrity issues involving lust and pornography. These first steps to openly talk about my own issues moved me beyond the denial that I had held on to for so long. It brought my issues into the light, and they were no longer hidden. Healing could begin. For me, hiding my issues was like lying. Everything was not okay. Stop lying to each other. Tell the truth, for we are parts of each other. And when we lie to each other, we are hurting ourselves. Ephesians 4:25. My first step study occurred as we prepared for the launch of this Kalamazoo CR. It took me through a process that helped me to more completely surrender my will to His. Even though I was already a believer who trusted Jesus and depended on Him for most of the areas of my life, there was still more that He wanted. That He wanted to reveal to me. In particular, as we went through the lesson 9 about taking personal inventory. God began to show me how much I still depend on my own effort and my own will to get through tough times. I wrongly believe that I'm strong enough to resist my own vices. So if you think that you're standing firm, be careful so that you don't fall. 1 Corinthians 10:12. I have turned over my desires, dreams, and vices to the Lord. He is my all. I continue to celebrate recovery over pornography and lust. As a great follow-up to the personal inventory lesson, later in Book 4, I learned more about taking a daily inventory. Principle 7 sums it up very well. Reserve a daily time with God for self-examination, Bible reading, and prayer in order to know God and His will for my life and to gain power to follow His will. Isn't that a great word? And to gain power to follow His will. You know, so often we try to do it on our own, but God is there, ready to give you the power to succeed. And that's what He wants for you in your recovery. Celebrate Recovery has helped renew my passion to love others and continue to provide a safe place for people to start on their own journey, their own recovery journey. I'm humbled and blessed that the Lord had called me to co-lead the Kalamazoo Celebrate Recovery. With God's help, I can be a leader that lives out His word. Love must be sincere, hate what is evil, cling to what is good, be devoted to one another in love, honor one another above yourselves, never lacking in zeal, but keep your spiritual fervor serving the Lord. Be joyful in hope, patient in affliction, faithful in prayer. Share with the Lord's people who are in need. Practice hospitality. Romans 12:9-13. I love that Celebrate Recovery is a Christ-centered ministry. I hope you could see that God had already been dealing with my hurts, habits, and hang-ups long before I started to come to CR. You know, that's interesting as we were singing that song today, My Recovery. It just made me think of how God had been reaching out, had been pursuing me, knowing that I had these issues in my life all along. He knew that. And He was guiding me on my recovery journey long before I knew it. And so He is there waiting for you to turn to Him. His word is the foundation of the 8 principles and 12 steps that we recite and put into practice. Remember, Jesus said in John 8:32, "Then you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free." Jesus knew you before you first stepped into CR. By His grace, you are here tonight. He will begin transforming your life the moment you surrender to Him. Right now, as you are. You don't have to do any of the cleanup. That's His job. You just need to surrender. He only requires a seeking heart that longs to find Him and the freedom He provides, not perfection. You don't have to hide your hurts, habits, and hang-ups from Him. He already knows them and is waiting for you with open arms. What are you waiting for? I thank God for Celebrate Recovery and for people like you who are at various places in your recovery journey. Be encouraged. Your identity is no longer in your hurt, habit, or hang-up, or your past. Your identity is who you are becoming. A precious child of God, becoming more like Christ one day at a time. Blessings and thank you for letting me share.